Thank you so much for listening to Breadwinning Mums. We really appreciate your continued support over the last year, and we're happy to announce that we have published the Breadwinning Mums book. Yay! This book is based on the conversations from the Breadwinning Mums Season 1 episodes. It highlights the candid journeys of each mums, as well as a golden nugget of wisdom from their life's lessons. Now is the perfect time to give the gift of the Breadwinning Mums book to the special mums in your life or to yourself. No matter where you are in life, I'm sure the practical tips within the Breadwinning Mums book will help you take your lives just a little bit further. Limited copies available, so order yours now at breadwinningmums.com. That's breadwinningmums.com. Coming up next on the Breadwinning Mums.
Women have an incredible intuition, and we don't actually listen to it enough. We've overwritten our intuition with our heads, and there's usually a little voice in your head or a feeling in your gut that's like, don't know if I can trust this person. But too often we override that with, well, they're XYZ, or they're this and they're that. And so a big part of what we actually do is teach women to learn to trust that intuition again, because we've numbed it, we avoid it, because when you unlock your intuition, it comes with everything.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Breadwinning Mums podcast. This is a place where we debunk the myths of working mums, cheer each other on, and show the world that you can be a mum and still pursue excellence in your chosen area of expertise. Today we're chatting with Jo Stone, the CEO and founder of the Balance Institute, where she empowers ambitious women create balance between career and family without stepping back or burning out. Jo shared her life story about growing up amongst corporate executives, reaching the C-suite at her work, and how she decided to be the kind of mum that fits her personality for her family. Here we go with Jo Stone. Hello, Jo.
Hi there, Jane. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you for being here. I really appreciate you making the time, and I'm so excited for this conversation. But for those of us listening who don't know who you are yet, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Jo Stone. I'm based here in Sydney, Australia, and I run an executive life coaching business where I help women who are ambitious and want to work find balance between all the parts about their lives without burning out or stepping back, which is what we've been told way too often.
Yeah.
As well as running the business, I'm also a mum of two girls who are 14 and almost 11. I'm reminded daily, and have a husband as well. And don't forget the dog and the cat. So we have a menagerie.
Dog and cat. Did they get along well?
The cat's the boss. So the dog is 25 times the size of the cat, but the cat is the boss. So as is always the way with most cats.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So I just want to take us back to the very beginning, I guess. If you wouldn't mind telling us about the young Jo. Where did you grow up?
So I was actually born in New Zealand, which can be relatively handy anytime the All Blacks are playing. And let's just say I never lose a rugby game because I get to choose many places to support, to an English father and an Australian mother who happened to be in New Zealand at the time for work, and was there for a little while, but then moved back to Australia, to Sydney, when I was 18 months, which was where my mum grew up. So it doesn't really make me much of a Kiwi, but I'll take it whenever I can. And, grew up with pretty much an only child. Have some half siblings, but I didn't really grow up with those. They were overseas. And yeah, pretty happy childhood. I was one of those happy-go-lucky kids. I loved getting my hands on any sport that I could. I did any dancing that I could, and spent much of my childhood in a cul-de-sac where it was the 80s and it was the come inside when the street lights go on, and otherwise come inside from school, dump your school bag, go out, grab your bike and play. Yeah. So parents have recently celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. Wow. And I was lucky enough to travel a lot as a child, which wasn't something that was pretty common in the 80s. My dad had quite a senior role for Xerox, who were a photocopier company at the time. And so a lot of my childhood, being an only child, was essentially traipsing after my parents. So which now I know has shaped so much of my upbringing, but I was the child at the gala dinner on the boss's table, and I flew unaccompanied at age 10 to Hawaii to catch up with my parents who'd been there for a big sales trip. And so it's those types of things. I can't now imagine putting my 10-year-old via Auckland, by the way, on an unaccompanied flight for 10, 12 hours. And, but yeah, that sort of forced me to grow up, and yeah, it was shaped a huge part of who I am, in terms of, because my dad was the boss, I was always Derek's daughter, and everyone was always afraid of me because they were worried about what I'd say to my father. But as was the case then, my dad grew up with, he was in the same company his entire career, as were all his mates. So they were friends, and we caught up to their house on the weekend. And when I got into corporate, everybody said to me, oh, watch out, that's the CEO. But in my mind, that was always David or Phil, who wore stupid jumpers and raced around after their children at barbecues. Yeah. It was, I know so much more about humans and how we grow up, but that was a big part of my conditioning and my upbringing as a child, was because I was the daughter of the boss. I always saw bosses as humans, and frankly, just stupid men running around, which served me well in the corporate world, because sometimes that's what they can be, is when you imagine any person that you might be afraid of in a silly jumper running around and making farting noises at a kid. Well, they're not so scary, are they?
Yeah, it's a great leveler, and it teaches you from a very early age not to get intimidated by men of a certain status, I guess. What about the way you were brought up, or during that environment? Were you taught or encouraged to speak up and to assert your own opinions, or were you told to just be a bit more demure, the good girl, as just, so to speak?
Yeah, so the good girl conditioning, I guess, for me, comes in a variety of ways. And a lot of my conditioning was always around never being too much. So I was the oldest cousin of 5, and we were all quite close. My cousin was 3 months younger than me, and I saw her pretty much every weekend. She was as close to a sister as I had. But being the oldest one, I was always accused of being bossy, and I was always accused of pushing everybody else around, and it could always be my way. And so part of my dimming my light, which I've only realized in the last sort of 5 to 10 years, as you go through this metamorphosis, as you reach middle age, was around not necessarily wanting to make everybody else feel bad. Because I was, you could say, lucky or blessed that, a lot of things came relatively easy to me. So I did pretty well at school. Most things I turned my mind to, whether it was sport or, I'd come home with a medal or I'd come home with a ribbon, because that was very much praised in my childhood. And then it was always about, well, you don't want to make your cousins feel bad, or you don't want to be a show off. And so while I was, there was a lot of, my mum's family was of Irish descent. And so in some ways, the only way you could get a word in edgeways in our family dinners was, it was about who spoke the loudest and who overspoke everybody else, was how you got your word said. And so I almost became bossy and used to interrupt people and push over people, because that's how you got it.
That was the learned behavior. Yeah,
that was the learned behavior. And so it was this interesting dichotomy of, you've got to push in and speak up, But then it's this fine line of, but you can't be too bossy and you can't praise yourself too much because then you're going to have a big head. So it was this push pull, almost double bind that I found myself in, where it was about, we've got to be pushy in order to get what you want, but then you can't be too pushy because then you're going to get a big head.
Yeah.
And so that was part of my conditioning. And then the other part of my conditioning was my dad was very, I guess he grew up working class. He started off as an electrician and made his way from the, repairing the photocopiers to almost running the business.
Wow.
And that was very much a sort of the English middle class work ethic, where it was about, you've got to work hard. And one of the biggest insults in my family was that you were lazy. And so part of my good girl conditioning was to always ensure that I was working and to never stop doing anything. So, marks were sort of encouraged, not pushed particularly hard, but as with anything, that was what got praise. I was a high achiever. I was a perfectionist. I was, to some extent, a people pleaser because I always wanted to, almost as the boss and the leader of my cousin crew, as you would call it, it was always my job to stop the fights and it was my job to keep the peace. So I've worked with a lot of women in time, and it's interesting how that conditioning, we always have the same conditioning, but it was almost put in place, or it was born of different paths.
Yeah.
And so that's been my path. There's that, my path tends to be the less common path, but it still results in the same outcomes and the
Yeah.
same dimming your light and worrying about what others think of you and that eternal quest for external validation.
Yeah, that's so interesting. At what age did you start to think about dimming the light so that you're not putting the others down?
It's only something that I've become aware of lately, because when it happens to you so gradually, you don't actually realize that you're doing it. But it probably started as young as 9 or 10, where it was about, don't be a show off and don't get a big head. And it was sometimes, as in many families, it often wasn't overtly said, dim your light, but it was
Yeah.
more comments that were made about so and so being a show off
Yeah.
and, oh, look at so and so. And so you then put two and two together and say, oh, well, this disparaging thing is being
Yeah.
said about so and so who is blowing their own horn or tooting their own trumpet. I'd better not do that because I don't want
Yeah.
them to say that about me. So it was never overtly said, put your head down. It was implied, and it was a meaning that I made of things, that it wasn't necessarily safe to shine as much as I thought was possible. And so you
Yeah.
always live in this self-imposed prison of having a self-imposed cap of what you can and can't do, where you're always comparing yourself to others and in search of, have I done a good job and is that okay? And then it, I guess, just continued throughout high school in terms of, whether it was looking for boys, or should I like him, or what should I wear, or am I fat, or all those things that unfortunately many girls go through. It was just a gradual
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
That has been, on reflection, only something that you can pull that thread through as you get older and you start to do more work on yourself.
Yeah. That's awesome. Okay, so did you know that you were going to be a career woman, that 10-year-old Jo that was traveling overseas on her own, partial through the year?
For some reason, work was always a part of who I was. I
Mm.
got my, well, you could say first job per se, but by the time I was in year 8, so what was that, sort of 13, 14, I was babysitting a lot. I was delivering papers. I still remember I kept a paper diary. I made $2,500 in year 8 at $5
Wow.
an hour, mind you. That was a lot of hours that I babysat. As soon as I could have a
Wow.
new job, I could. I went
Yeah.
overseas on exchange when I was 16 for 3 months to France. And for some reason, just work was always a part of what I wanted. It was, yes, being a mum was there, but for me, it was always about, I'm more like my dad than my mum, in terms of, my mum was pretty much a stay-at-home mum, as it was very common in the 80s. And so I think from that perspective, I always saw my dad on stage. I saw my dad winning awards. And so like many women, I more identified with that, you could call it more masculine path of working and earning money and having independence and being on stage and being able to impact and influence people. So that was always my path. And even when I went to uni, it was always about I was going to be a CEO one day, and that I always had, you could say, big dreams. And I used to get told, put your head in, don't be so silly. You know, I was one of those people that 3 months into my first job asked for a pay rise and got told to get back in my box. And I went, okay,
Can totally relate. Yeah.
as many do.
Yeah.
But yeah, that has always been my path. And even when I met my now husband, before we even had the sort of babies or even marriage conversation, from the day we met, I was earning more than him. And so it was never a conversation that working was always going to be part of who I am. And even when I was on mat leave, I was consulting. I was, it's part of my DNA. And if I was to deny it, I think everybody around me would not be very happy, including me.
Because you're not happy. Exactly. What about your relationship with your mom growing up as she sees you more and more grow in this direction of someone who is really find a lot of fulfillment in your own career, in your own work and creation? Has it ever been a conversation with her where she feels like, oh no, but that's how women shouldn't be? Has there ever been a discussion there?
It was never said that way. I mean, my mum didn't necessarily work. I think she always recognized that I was ambitious and that I was hungry. When I first got pregnant, I remember her saying to me something like, so how long do you think you're going to have off? And I said, 9 months with my first, and my husband was going to take 3 off. And she said, well, what happens if after you've had the baby, you feel like you want to spend more time with the baby and maybe you don't want to go back to work? And that comment was said, and I said, well, we'll see, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to want to go back to work. And then when I got pregnant with number 2, then the question came again, well, now you've got 2. Are you sure you want to work that hard? Are you sure you don't want to spend more time with the kids? And so she's never been discouraging in terms of saying, no, you shouldn't work, or that's not women do, or she's never been over like that. But I think she just sees a lot of my dad in me, and well, you work so hard, and so very supportive. And they've been great. Like at the moment, my husband's broken his foot and can't drive, and so they're picking children up from dancing and bringing them home. And I still remember when I had my second, my husband when I had a 10-week-old and a 3-year-old, he decided to go and walk the Kokoda track and was gone for 2 weeks. And at the same time, we happened to be renovating the kitchen and the bathroom. And they went through the floor and then had to redo the whole thing. So I had a 2-story house with a giant gap going from this. So I called my mum and said, I can't do this.
Help.
At that stage, my little one wasn't sleeping because my first baby was an angel baby. Second child was interesting. And so I had to call my mum and say, can I come live with you? I can't do this. I can't do this by myself. So they've always been great at, taking me in when I need to. But also my mum, while she wasn't necessarily, saying you should be a stay-at-home mum, my mum's also quite fiercely independent. So even as a child, she played tennis. She's done French lessons for a long time. She played bridge for a long time. She does tap dancing. She goes to the Sydney Dance Company in the city for dancing on the weekends. So both my role models were very independent, were very, and it wasn't all about, my mum hates cooking. My mum. So it wasn't like I was sort of given this role model of, well, you have to be maternal and put everybody else first.
Yeah, that's so great. She has her own sense of self. She has her own life outside of family. And I think that's really important, regardless whether if you're a career mom or not. Okay, great. And what is life for you like right now? So you're the founder and CEO of Balanced Life. You're also a mom and a wife. How are you making it all work?
The $1 million question that I get asked a lot. And the way I make it work is with what I call a toolkit. So I have a range of tools that I have uncovered and discovered and learnt, sometimes very hard won, over the past 5 or so years. So I started my business 5, 6 years ago after I was in the corporate world for 20 years. And in that, was quite senior. My goal was to always be have a chief in my title from a career perspective. So I got to the executive, got to be on the executive team of a listed company, and I had an Asia Pacific role with the big team, and it had ticked all my boxes. And so, I learned to juggle. I was traveling a lot. And that was, I guess, when we started setting up our family dynamic, where my husband, we joke, has always been name number one on the parent form. So the idea is that, he does most
I
of
know
the
what you mean.
drop-offs and the pickups and all those things. So how we make it work is with a toolkit where I still take care of myself a lot. I run the business. I have we're a team of 5 now. So, growing exponentially, double-digit growth year on year ever since we started. And the way that I have done all that is really by putting my own balance first. So as an example, my husband broke his foot, I mentioned, a week ago, but I still play soccer every week. I play netball every week. I run twice a week. I went for a float tank on the weekend. I caught up for a wine with a friend. And so we've made our life work that I know I have to fill up my cup if I'm going to be there for everybody else, if I'm going to be there for the kids, if I'm going to be there for him. I'm a terrible nurse. We'll put it out there. So he said to me the other day, do you know that being married to you fosters independence? And I said, are you saying I'm a terrible nurse? And he looked at me and he said, you said it, not me. So I foster independence in everybody around me. And
you're an excellent coach. You're an excellent life coach.
Excellent coach. And so we make it work.
Yeah. That is awesome. Are there any specific rituals that you guys do on a weekly basis as a family to make it through the week, the month, the year?
Yeah, so we've got a lot of, I guess, strategies in place that many families do with busy lives, because I've got 2 incredibly active children. So we have a meal plan that we do at the start of the week. We have a family calendar where everything is in the calendar. And my daughter had something on the weekend and she came to me and said, Mum, it's time to go. And I said, it's not on the calendar. And I said, what's the rule? And she said, if it's not on the calendar, it doesn't exist. So she knows.
And is it a physical calendar that you have?
No, it's an online calendar.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so an Apple calendar between us. So that goes in there. And we diligently sit down probably about twice a week and actually go through our week. So Sunday night, we did that with the kids, and we sit down and we go through, all right, what's on Monday? Who's walking to school? Who's walking home? Okay, you've got swimming. What do you need for lunch? What extra stuff do you need? And we basically go through the entire week. And then usually on Wednesday or Thursday, as the weekend starts to firm up, we go through it again with the kids in terms of, all right, this is what you've got on. This is what I'm doing after that, so that everybody knows that Mum's going for a float in the afternoon, and then I'm going to do groceries, and then they've got to add the stuff they want to the grocery list. So we run a very collaborative household, which, given their level of busyness, also is a big part of my setting expectations for, this is my time. This is when I'm doing this. This is when my husband and I have date lunch once a week. So my calendar's blocked off because he's at home and I'm at home. And recently we had a sick child, and she said, "Oh, what's happening for lunch?" And I said, "Well, you can get yourself some leftovers. Daddy and I are going out." And she said, "What?" I said, "Yeah, it's Thursdays. We go out for lunch on Thursdays." So we hold really strong boundaries as to what happens when, and communication really as a family has been a big part of that ritual.
Nice. And do you take each other out? You take turn choosing the place to go on Thursdays?
Well, it will depend on what we've got, what else is on. So sometimes it might just end up being a walk. Somewhere, we live quite close to the bush, so it might be a walk, obviously not now because he's broken his foot. A walk's not an option. Or we might just go to lunch. We've got quite a few. We love Japanese. There's some cheap and cheaples around. So it might be, let's head up to here. Or we also love going to saunas and things like that. So sometimes we might book in a sauna. So we try to keep it interesting. And it doesn't have to be long. It's usually between an hour and a half. And it's that time where typically we try to ban logistical talk, as in, well, like, you're doing this and I'm doing that.
That's right. Yeah, because it's just about connecting.
Yeah, it's just about connecting about what else is going on in life, or about, he's passionate about a number of different sports, where I can avoid talking about the business too much, because that's a passion of mine and sometimes not something that he wants to hear about. So, we have almost no-go topics. And we talk a lot about personal development, because we both do a lot of our own work on ourselves. So it might be, something that's come up for us recently or something we're noticing. And it's just that really important time to connect.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. So when you met your now husband, you were earning more than him. You're a blissfully breadwinner of your family. And at times your husband, I think you mentioned that he takes care of the kids and or became a stay-at-home dad.
Mhm.
Has this dynamic affected your relationship at all?
So we've had all stages. So
Mm,
when we first met, he was working full time. When we had our first, he then went to part time. His mum passed away unexpectedly and he had some mental health struggles. So he had a couple of years off and then he's gone back. He's became a personal trainer and was doing that sometimes. He's been a foreign exchange trader at night. He's done that. So he's had many different careers. And I guess our relationship has shifted all the time. I guess the one
mm,
thing that he has to continue to work on is, unfortunately, as a man, there is still a lot of subconscious programming where if you're not providing, and they
mm,
take that to mean providing financially, that often he
mm.
can feel less than. So it's
Yeah,
nothing to do with me. That's an identity that he is really working to build to own the choices that he has. And that's a common thread that I see. I work with a lot of women who out earn their partners. And it's a very, very common challenge is
mm,
that despite a lot of the kid stuff now is a lot easier. It's not like people say, oh, look, dad's gone to pick up, pick up at many schools now. There's tons of dads and there's lots of
mm,
dads doing things flexibly. So that's definitely got easier since
mm,
we first, gosh, in 14 years since we had our first, that's definitely shifted.
mm.
But for him, it's more about what's his role in the family. And that's
Yeah,
something that he has to continue to explore himself. It's not something that I can fix. It's not my job to solve. And it's
yeah,
not mine to make any meaning that I should dim my light or I should dim my success
yeah.
because of where he's at. He's got to do it. We've got to keep
Amen.
communicating.
So glad to hear it. And it's so good if the partners are able to be conscious of that and then work on their own um programming and beliefs and maybe examine whether if that's necessarily something that they want to carry through. But in your line of work, working with other breadwinning women, who are having similar type of dynamic with their partners who may not necessarily even know about this push and pull, and in fact are blaming the breadwinning women for their perceived unmanliness, I guess, or a lack of being the provider, so to speak. How would you support those women?
Well, when you have a toolkit and you build deep self-awareness, which is what happens when you do work on yourself, you begin to realize that you can detach yourself from the opinions or emotions or perspectives of others. And when you learn that that's really what a boundary is that you are not responsible for how someone else thinks, acts, and behaves. And when you begin to separate yourself from whatever your partner is doing and learn yourself not to get triggered, because that's usually what happens. We play trigger ping pong, where maybe a man makes a passive aggressive comment about the woman working too much or earning too much money, because a lot of men, even though they say on the surface they're okay with it,
Mm,
deep down, subconsciously, they've still got a lot of programming because really we are the first generation to have en masse shifted gender roles. And there is decades and hundreds of years in actual fact of programming that these men are carrying with them. And so it can be really tricky for them and they get incredibly triggered. So what I would say to those women is you need to do the work on yourself to stop playing trigger ping pong, because
mm.
the ping pong just becomes pong when they say something and you don't react and you don't make it mean anything about you.
Yeah,
And I also teach my women to almost put up a glass wall so that I
mm,
say when he vomits stuff on you, imagine it hits the glass like in the
yeah,
movies and then just slides right down. And none of that actually comes on to you. So you
you,
have to
yeah.
keep shining bright. And one of my other favorite sayings that's come up a lot lately is that when you are a bright light in the world, there's two ways you can look at that. Either you cast a long shadow or you light the way, and you get to choose how you interpret that. And for many men, they feel that that bright light casts a long shadow and it makes them feel inadequate and they're not providing and they're less than. Or it can shine a bright light for future generations, for changing generational history. And it's on then the men to do the work on themselves to realize that there are many other ways to find that security. And that's not to say that it's not an easy road. You know, those men are trailblazing at the same time. It takes a special man to be married to a woman like us. There are a lot of men that wouldn't sign up for that. You know, they're almost men who signed on to have to do work on themselves because they're going to be triggered.
Yep. That's awesome. Thank you for that. That's such a great observation and recognition. I want to talk about your daughters, if you wouldn't mind. So almost 11 and 14. How has the motherhood journey been for you?
Yeah, motherhood has been a wild ride. They're awesome children. They're full of personality. They very much know who they are in the world. And, you know, they're both very different at the same time. So my eldest was very much that angel baby. So we thought we were rock parents. We're like, we got this baby down pat. We took her overseas when she was 6 months old on a month away. You know, you got on a 15-hour flight and you can see everyone around you looking horrified at you. And she didn't make a peep. She, you know, traveled around the world. She was an absolute legend and has been pretty chill for a lot of her life. And, you know, now she's in year 9 at high school and, you know, has settled in really well, has got a really great group of friends and is just really well balanced. She loves dancing. She's turned out to be, you know, quite academic, which is not something that we ever really pushed and expected with my background now being a coach and seeing what happens when we emphasize grades too much. She actually came home recently and said to me, Mum, I wished you cared more about grades because I don't care about grades because I see what happens when we care too much about them and it really messes us up. So I don't really ask about her grades. I don't care about what she gets because it's actually relevant or reflective of where she'll end up in the world or her intelligence. And so that's something that, so yes, that's my oldest one. She's, you know, doing really well with surviving teenagehood, relatively intact. We haven't yet killed her. But yeah, she's very chill and it's just really, really fun to be around. And then my little one proved second time round, the universe goes, okay, you think you're a good parent? Try again. Maybe it wasn't you, maybe it was the child. So she came out into this world, I say, holding handfuls of glitter. It has always been a bowerbird since. So he's very, loves clothes, loves things that sparkle, loves little things, and is one of those personalities. So my eldest is sort of more even-tempered, whereas my little one, Stella, has always sort of been delightful or a nightmare. So I have one even-tempered and then I have one that goes up and down. As always, the yin and the yang, you get both. And so she's, you know, had her fair share of health challenges between the two of them. We've had 5 broken arms. So we've had lots of breaks. We've had lots of surgeries. Stella had quite a lot of health challenges. And, but she's just come through them. She's just this little bright star who always has a smile, always has a laugh. And she, you know, has some academic challenges and things like that. So I wouldn't necessarily put her in the neuroatypical, but she's what we call highly sensitive. So she's sensitive, you know, she has a sensitive gut. She's sensitive to textures, she's sensitive to noise. And, you know, that results in some different challenges. And she's very much a really, really big feeler. So she has huge feelings, which is part of that sensitivity. And so she's taught our whole family to be, you know, I come from a long line of non-feelers. And I've been gifted this child who has incredibly deep feelings about everything. And so I've become this bridge to help her understand her feelings, help translate them and navigate a world that is still coming to terms with people who feel big. So the 2 girls get along relatively well as well as teenagers and preteens do. They whinge and they fight, but ultimately I hope they'll end up being friends. Stella too loves dancing. And I guess our relationships are different in a way. Stella loves my girls call what I do woo-woo, as in mummy woo-woo. And so Stella loves the woo. Stella loves crystals and Stella loves all the tools that I give her, whereas no surprise, the more the little one leans into them, the older one rejects them, which is very normal. But they're loads of fun. And I'm not the type of mum who's ever been the playing Barbies mum or the, you know, bake cookies with them or any of that type of thing. I'm more the let's go out of the house. Let's go and make this thing fun. Let's go travel. So what I've really had to do over the motherhood, I guess over my parenting journey, is learn the type of mother that I am. And I spent a long time thinking that I wasn't a good mum because I wanted to work and there was something wrong with me, and that I didn't want to spend all hour of every weekend with my children. I wanted time for myself. I wanted time for my friends. And so I've had to let go a lot of that. And the more I've embraced me being me, the type of mother that I am, knowing that I'm the type of mother that they've signed up for, that they need, then that has made everything so much better.
Oh, that's interesting. I haven't thought about it that way. What kind of mums are there? So the traditional ones that stay at home and cook, and then the one that likes to go outdoors and more experiential type of the quality time?
Yeah, well, I guess for me, there's many different dynamics to families, and there's many different ways to parent. And what I have found is I'll say the secret sauce is really learning to be yourself and letting your children see you, as opposed to the mother that you think you should be or society says that you should be. The more you embrace yourself, then they get the best of you. And the more you learn to fill up your own cup, they also get the best of you. They know that when mum's hangry, it's not good for anybody. So make sure mum is always fed because, they have to navigate that. They have to navigate a dad who gets grumpy sometimes. And it's really the more you own your strengths. And like I said, I'm more of all right, I need to go and do something. You guys go chuff off and do your own thing. It's that fostering independence that's really important to me. And when I tried to force things that weren't authentic to me, it really worked anyway.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So you created the Balance Institute 5 years ago. Can you tell us a little bit more about the genesis? What was going through your career/personal life at the time? And when did you decide to say, this is not what I want? This is not something that brings me happiness?
Yeah, so it was probably in sort of 2017, gosh, that was a while ago now, when I was in that sort of pinnacle of my career. So I was a chief marketing officer, that Asia Pacific role. And we just built a new house from scratch. So we'd moved into the house. We had, there were probably sort of 2 and 5-ish at that point in time. And, I was working really, really hard. We had a huge mortgage, and moving into the house was meant to be the silver bullet. That was everything I ever wanted. Like, okay, now I've got everything. I've got the kids, I've got the husband, I've got the house, I've got the career, this is it. So why aren't I happy? And it was going on that journey of realizing that, okay, something has to change because this isn't sustainable. And it was as I checked myself into hospital thinking I was having an attack of an autoimmune disease. And I realized that despite having a body that I could push and I thought was pretty robust, eventually it couldn't break. And it was this little voice inside me that was saying something's missing, like something's not right. You should be happier. You should feel better about this amazing life that you've built. And so at the peak of, I think it was 2018, when the housing market went a bit stupid in my area, as it does in Sydney on a regular basis, we decided to sell the house. And that was after 18 months. And it was the forever house. There was no intention of selling this.
Oh, wow.
And so we put it on the market without having bought anything else, thinking, well, if we get a stupid price for it, all right, let's sell it. And we ended up going on this really quite rapid journey of putting the house on the market. And there's a theme in my life of when I decide to do something, I do it, and we do it fast. So decided to sell the house, and it was all about that financial freedom. Because while I thought I wanted the house and the life and the keeping up with the Joneses, what I realized was I'd lost my freedom. Didn't have the flexibility to start my business that I wanted to do. My husband didn't have the flexibility to quit his job that he hated because we needed the money, and it wasn't worth it. So we sold the house, ended up moving in with my parents for a while, and then ended up buying something else a few suburbs out further away from the city at a lower price point. I've gone from this beautiful brand new 5-bedroom house with a pool and a water feature and chickens into a 1980s renovated and still lovely, but much smaller house. And that was part of all right, well, let me sell the house. I then quit my job. And, Mick and I were going through some challenging times then because he was dealing with his mum's passing. And so there's a whole confluence of factors. And that was after essentially blowing up my life, selling my house, quitting my job, trying to start my own business, my own health battles, that I realized that actually maybe it wasn't the house and maybe it wasn't the career, which were the things that I blamed
Yeah.
for feeling the way I did. And
Yeah.
so I then had to go on my own journey to say, well, okay, well, if it wasn't the house and if it wasn't the career, if it wasn't the husband, the only thing left to change is me. So I then had to basically go and deconstruct what actually made me happy. Who was I? What did I want? If I wanted to start a business, what was that? And thus, I guess, began a multi-year journey, which still continues to this day, to understand who am I? What do I want? What actually makes me happy? And how do I reconstruct my life in a way where I get to be myself instead of trying to be somebody that I'm not?
Yeah. Wow. Can I ask how old you were at that time? And I understand that it's quite a few years worth of journey, but when you first
Mm.
started questioning, maybe this is not what makes me happy.
Yeah, so this was 2017. We sort of started to sell the house. So that would have
Mm.
made me, let's do the maths here, 38.
38. Okay. All right. Yeah. I'm only asking because I think there is this, people make a lot of their significant life choices in their nine, so 29, 39, 49,
Mhm.
59, thereabouts. So I wonder, it's just a theory, but I wonder whether if there is some element of truth in that observation.
Yeah, well, I find a lot of women, something happens around 40.
Yeah.
And that is usually when most women come to me. So between 30, 38, 39, and kind of
Yeah.
45. That's their prime age because we've got to this
Yeah.
point of going, hang a second, like, what if I'm halfway through? By
Mm,
then, we've usually stopped caring as much about what
mm,
people think, and we've got
mm,
enough runs on the board and got enough experience in life to go, hang on a second, like this
yeah.
isn't changing.
Mm,
I don't want to do another 40 years this way.
mm,
And so that's when we start blowing stuff up.
yeah.
And it's also when that voice inside our head starts going, hang on, like you're not happy. Your happiness actually matters more than the money. And for those of us that are having children, usually by the time you get to sort of 40-ish, the kids, you don't tend to have newborns as much. The kids
Mm,
maybe have started school and you start going, okay, hang on. I
mm,
can't now blame the sleepless nights. I can't blame the fact that I haven't, I've got my body back. Like the kids are
mm,
starting to be more independent. I'm running out of excuses as
yeah.
to, okay, like
Yeah.
something has to change. And
Yeah.
that's usually a pivotal moment when a woman starts saying, all right, I've got to do something. And that's usually when they start listening to podcasts, personal development, maybe seek out a therapist. And the big question is like, what's wrong with me? I should be happy. What on earth? And that's when we see, massive instances of burnout.
Mm,
People start blowing up their lives. They've got to leave their job or they say no to a promotion. And that
mm,
was part of my journey, was working out, all right, well, I didn't necessarily start out intend to be a coach. I wanted to be a consultant. I
mm,
was more comfortable in, black patent heels and a boardroom of 100 people with some post-it notes than I was ever
mm,
talking about someone's personal life. And it
mm.
was like the universe kept nudging me here. So yeah, 5 years on, now it's very much I'm very much one of those coaches who I guess I am my own guinea pig, and I am my own best testimonial now that I've got, well, almost 400 women have gone through my signature program. So it's not just me anymore, thankfully.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was very much a journey that I had to go out by myself and say, this is where I was. And that's why a lot of my marketing and everything I do tends to resonate, because I'm always sharing my story, my journey. And that's what makes this real, because so much stuff
Yeah.
out there is not made for women like us. It talks about stepping back, talks about you should just go part-time. And then a lot of women who come to me, their career is a really important part of who they are. It's not just financial. Even if they won the lotto, they'd still want to work. It's how they want to reach their potential. And we do
Mm,
not resonate with messages about, well, maybe you should plateau for a while the kids are a certain age. Like, hell no. I
mm.
don't want to do that. I've got to find
Yeah.
another way to do this.
Yeah. Awesome. Can you tell us a little bit more about your signature program?
Yeah, so my signature program is called Balance and Beyond. And I have found that on this journey to burning out, which is all too common, we really need a proper toolkit that's actually going to help us find the calm that we're looking for, find that confidence. And so I believe that this toolkit really comes in three key parts. So the first part of the toolkit that we all need, if we're actually going to find this peace and contentment inside, is we've got to learn to focus. And this isn't just about learning how to manage our time, because we're usually ninjas at that. But it's all these self-sabotage programs that we have, the perfectionism, the people pleasing, the procrastination. we've got to stop all of that if we're actually going to get ahead.
Mm.
Part of that, once we've stopped our self-sabotage and we're learning to focus, so many women, a new thing actually is women saying they've got ADHD. Like, no, you don't. You just don't know how to focus. Some do. Let's not dismiss that. But a significant portion are letting their brains control them. The second piece that we've really got to do is learn how to build unshakable confidence. This is when we have to actually find out who we are, because so many women are being who they think they should be or who they used to be and aren't actually intentionally cultivating their own identity and letting go of the weeds that have held them back. And so what we do is go on this beautiful journey of, I call them limiting beliefs, or taking the weeds out of your garden and helping you let go of these guilt and the shame and the resentment and the emotion that is actually holding you back. And then the final piece, once you've built unshakable confidence and you've got focus, the other piece of the toolkit we need is to learn how to be a woman of influence. And I've spoken a bit about identity today, but this is really transitioning ourselves from being what I call a get shit done person or a get stuff done person and becoming a woman of influence. And it starts at the identity level. And then we give you tools around how to actually speak up, because many women don't know how to do that. Or they bulldoze, or they've got strategies that aren't conducive to promotion. And this is where we see, people aren't being valued. They're doing two people's jobs. They're not being compensated for it. They're not being heard. And that is all symptomatic of this identity shift that we need to make. So
Awesome.
That's what I see that's what we need.
Yep. And how do you deliver it? Is it one-on-one?
So mine's a group coaching program, because I found that we need to do this work in the company of other women. It's very difficult for us to just do this one-on-one and really see the transformation, because so many challenges that you'll be facing, you won't actually see. But if you hear another woman say it, you go,
Yeah,
oh,
you can totally
me
relate.
too. So I
Yeah.
do this over 12 weeks. And it's, when I say group coaching program, it's a combination, a blended learning model. So we have video modules that people watch, because you need the tools, you need the neurological understanding. And we've got this beautiful, I guess we work on 3 levels. We've got the neuroscience, we've got a lot of mindset, and we also work on an energetic and emotional level. That's what I found is getting us the biggest shifts as fast as we possibly can. You also, people who come to me also get one-on-ones. So I have a beautiful coaching team where you do need some of that release and you need some of that one-on-one. And we have group sessions every week. So across the 12-week period, this is also about getting together with other women. We are not meant to do this alone, despite the fact that we feel bad because we have to ask for help. There is magic when women come together, and the change is exponential.
Yeah. Awesome. Is there any specific magic number that you find works with a cohort of women? Are there any numbers that you think can be a little bit too big and then you don't get that intimate feel of sharing your story?
Well, I typically have between 30 and 40 women in my program at any one time. And given I run, as an example, there's 2 Q&A call options. You might have anywhere between, 6 and 15 or 20 on a call. But what I've found is that when it comes to a magic number, what is more important is the person who's holding the space and their ability to invite everyone into the space to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And that's what we've really learned to craft, is how do you hold the container where it's one full of integrity, where you get people sharing things in our calls that they've never shared with anybody, and they share it for the first time with us because they feel safe. And to be around women, I often say that women like us are really hard to find at the school gate. It's really hard to find a woman who gets you. And when you get everybody in a room and you don't have to filter out the ones who, because I have filters not only for, I guess, somebody's level of ambition, but also I don't invite mean girls into my space. I've got a very good mean girl radar. And so they're not here. And it's this beautiful opportunity to come and be with other people like you. And for most women, they have never, ever had that experience. And so that's when they just lean right in. That's why I have such a huge attendance rate, because it's so refreshing to literally everything someone says. They go, oh my gosh. I mean, I've just run a free 3-day masterclass, and we had over 1,000 registrations, and we had hundreds of people turn up live on those calls. And you can still create that safe environment even in a chat type context.
Okay, interesting. It's you mentioned before you have a very good mean girls radar, and I think it's very important as we get older that we invite people into our lives that will bring some type of values, right? That will make us feel safe, but also we feel like we can be vulnerable with them as well without being penalized later on for it. Do you have any specific tips on how to filter out those mean characters because they don't necessarily come across as mean girls, right? And most of them come across as this assertive person who really cares for you, that you probably figure out later on that, oh, there's a little bit of a different side to them.
Mm-hmm. Usually women have an incredible intuition, and we don't actually listen to it enough. We've overwritten our intuition with our heads, and there's usually a little voice in your head or a feeling in your gut that's like, don't know if I can trust this person. But too often we override that with, well, they're XYZ, or they're this and they're that. And so a big part of what we actually do is teach women to learn to trust that intuition again, because we've numbed it, we avoid it, because when you unlock your intuition, it comes with everything. I mean, many of us unlock the maternal part. You know, you can look at a child and go, you've been up to something, and there is no evidence to suggest. So you look at them and go, you need to pee. You just know that something has to happen. So that side of the intuition is awakened.
Yeah.
But we dull it when it comes to judgment or decision making or relationships with others. Our head gets in the way. And so that's what I found is the biggest thing we need to do, is learn to trust our gut that tells us, are we in alignment with this person, that tells us if we can trust them.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Jo. So for breadwinning mums listening to us right now who are interested to find your work or maybe join your program, how do they find you?
Yeah, so the best way is to go to my website, which is balanceinstitute.com, and that's where they can see lots of information about Balance and Beyond, which is our 12-week program. There's lots of videos there of women sharing what actually has worked for them. And if they want to book in a call to talk about what we do and what they might need, then there's also a book a call link on that website as well.
Perfect. And one question that I always ask all guests is, do you have an alpha mum song?
An alpha mum song? Alicia Keys' Girl on Fire is always a good go-to.
Yeah, awesome. All right, then. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Jo. I really appreciate all of the tips that you've shared with us, and I really hope to see you in person one day.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Great. See you then. This episode of the Breadwinning Mums was produced by me, Jane Lim, and our theme music was produced by Sam McNally. We recorded this episode on the lens of dark people who have passed their parenting story for generations. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and thank them for caring for country. Connect with us through LinkedIn or Instagram at Breadwinning Mums. Until next time.